Welcome. Today, we're stepping right onto the global chessboard. We're going to peel back the layers of international relations to really understand the high-stakes game that nations play, and more importantly, why they make the moves they do.
So, how can we even begin to make sense of foreign policy? Well, what if we think about it like a giant strategy game? A global chessboard with its own set of rules, key players, and long-term playbooks. Once you get a handle on those, the daily news starts to make a whole lot more sense.
Okay, first things first. Every game needs rules. So before we can even get into strategy, let's break down the core concepts, the absolute fundamentals that govern how countries interact with each other.
The most fundamental rule of the entire game is something called sovereignty. And this idea isn't new. It goes all the way back to a treaty from 1648. It basically established the modern system we have today, and it means that each country is the supreme authority inside its own borders.
To put it really simply, it's the international version of my house, my rules. And this is exactly why debates over humanitarian intervention get so incredibly heated. It raises a really tough question. When, if ever, is it okay for the world to step in and break another country's house rules?
So, let's say a country wants to pressure another one, but without actually starting a war. One of the most common moves on the board is to use sanctions. You can think of them like a penalty card in a game, designed to make another player change their behavior.
But here's the thing. Sanctions aren't a one-size-fits-all tool. Not at all. They can be economic, like cutting off weapons sales. They can be international, where a whole bunch of countries team up. Or they can be about simple trade disputes. The real challenge, though, making them actually work. Is a sanction going to change a leader's mind, or is it just going to end up hurting regular people?
And then there's the ultimate game-ending move from the Cold War, mutually assured destruction, or fittingly, MAD. The logic is simple, but honestly, it's terrifying. If both players know that starting a nuclear war means they will also be completely destroyed, then neither side will ever risk making that first move. It's a stalemate born from pure terror.
But that strategy has its limits, right? I mean, it was designed for a two-player game between two superpowers. In today's world, we've got multiple nuclear powers and non-state actors like terrorist groups who, let's be honest, don't play by the same rational rules. So the MAD doctrine just isn't the foolproof deterrent it might have once been.
All right, so now that you know some of the basic rules, you need a playbook. You need a guiding philosophy that shapes your long-term strategy and really determines how you're going to play the game. A really prominent playbook, especially in recent history, is neoconservatism. This philosophy basically says a nation should proactively use its strength, both economic and military, to spread its values, like democracy. It was a huge influence on American foreign policy after 9/11, and was the thinking behind interventions in places like Afghanistan and Iraq.
Another playbook is kind of like an ethical checklist. Just war theory isn't about winning, it's about playing fair. It asks two huge questions. First, jus ad bellum. Is there a truly just reason to go to war in the first place? And second, jus in bello. Once the war starts, are we fighting it the right way, ethically? This is where things like the Geneva Conventions, which protect civilians and prisoners, come from. Now, some playbooks are a lot more optimistic. Take the democratic peace theory. It's based on this really simple but powerful observation. Historically, countries with democratic governments just don't really fight wars against each other. So the theory goes, the more democracies we have in the world, the more peaceful the world will be.
There's a fun, kind of informal version of this called the Golden Arches theory. The idea is that once a country develops a middle class that's strong enough to support a McDonald's, its people are way more interested in stability and making money than in starting conflicts. It's a simple way of showing how being economically connected can lead to peace.
All right, we've got the rules, we've got the playbooks. Now for the main event. Let's look at the classic debates, the big strategic clashes you see playing out in the news every single day. These are the arguments that really define modern foreign policy.
The most fundamental debate is always the carrot or the stick. Is it more effective to use soft power, persuading other countries through diplomacy, culture, and foreign aid? Or is it better to use hard power, forcing them with military threats and tough sanctions? A lot of modern statecraft is trying to find that perfect sweet spot right in the middle.
Then you've got the constant question of, should we go it alone or build a team? Acting unilaterally, on your own, is definitely faster and more decisive. But multilateral action, working with allies through groups like the UN, brings international legitimacy and shared resources, even if it can be painfully slow to organize.
And finally, your whole strategy can depend on your opponent.
Are you dealing with a rational actor, a leader who responds logically to threats and incentives? Or are you facing an irrational actor, maybe a rogue state or a terrorist group, whose goals just aren't based on a normal cost-benefit analysis, making them pretty much immune to the usual tactics?
So, we've covered the rules of the game, the playbooks, and the big clashes on the global chessboard. What does all this mean for you, as you're trying to make sense of what's happening in the world?
Here's the key takeaway. You now have a foundational toolkit to see the game being played behind the headlines. These aren't just jargon or buzzwords. When you hear about a trade dispute or a diplomatic summit, you can start to spot the core concepts and the strategies that are really at play.
So here's a little challenge. The next time you're watching the news, try to spot these ideas. Are countries defending their sovereignty? Are they using the carrot or the stick? Acting alone or with allies? The game is always on. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning and keep learning.